CFO of Adaptec Holding in 2008, Ziad was involved in private equity investments, buyouts, and restructuring activities in Europe, the Middle East, and North America. From September 2008 until March 2013, and as the CFO of Adaptec, the largest listed construction group in the GCC, Ziad successfully managed Adaptec's financial and repositioning strategy in the most difficult economic crises to hit the region, and operating in the worst hit sector without any new capital increase. Ziad was the face of Adaptec in the media and successfully managed the relationship with the regulators and all other stakeholders. Adaptec's listed shares were the most traded shares in volume and value on the DFM, and the share price increased many multiples during his tenure. Ziad received public recognition and various awards for his successful efforts in restructuring Adaptec and in containing its potential reputational damage to the DFM and the UAE financial markets in general. The various successive management teams that followed his departure did not achieve similar results, and the company never reached the previous successes achieved by Ziad, although hundreds of millions of US dollars were invested as new capital in the company. Ziad joined the Dubai-based Faqih IVF Group in April 2013 as their CEO and turned the business, which started as one small clinic with 2 doctors in Dubai, into the leader in its sector in the UAE, employing over 250 medical staff and providing the full range of medical fertility, obstetrics and gynecology care, and embryology and genetic laboratory services in various locations in the UAE. In 2015, Ziad negotiated the sale of the business in NMC Health, a UK-listed company at a valuation exceeding $500 million US. Ziad is running his own advisory group as the founder and CEO of Prime Strategy Consulting Group, a boutique strategy and restructuring consultancy, advising regional and international clients that include major private and listed companies, family offices, and investment funds in the GCC and Europe on strategy, restructuring, investments, and divestments. Ziad and his team usually take a leading role in the operational and financial audit prior to making investments, or after, to ensure that the operations and strategy adhere to the current and future guidelines and targets of all stakeholders. Ziad usually maintains his personal involvement either as a board member, a board advisor on strategy and operations, or as a member of the various governance committees, like the investment committee, the audit committee, or the selection and remuneration committee. Ziad was voted in 2009 as the Revolutionary CFO of the Year and for Excellence in Finance in 2010 and in 2011 as the most admired CFO in the Middle East. Wall Street Journal listed him in 2010 among the top 20 influential non-royal decision makers in the UAE. Arabian Business listed him in 2012 among the top 500 most influential Arabs in the world, and in 2013 and 14 among the top 50 influential Brits in the UAE. Ziad was awarded the Middle East CEO of the Year in the Healthcare Sector 2014 by CEO Middle East magazine. Ziad is known as a public speaker and author. His book, Intelligent Learning, Competing in Systemic Chaos, offers an approach to learning and managing speedy changes to be able to survive and succeed in the continuously changing business environment. Welcome, Ziad, to our session today, to the webinar. I think we should be starting now by hosting the session. So I'll give it now to Ziad, and just some rules. You will all be muted, but if you have any questions, you can type them in the question box or in the chat box. So we will be taking the questions after the session, and if needed, during the session, but mostly you can type them into the chat box or in the question box, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. And now I'm going to give it to Ziad. So Ziad, welcome to our session today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. The session today is about learning for the future. As we're all witnessing recently, lots of things are happening that are unusual. So thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts about the subject of learning. It is always definitely more enjoyable speaking to a group of intelligent learners, not business people. By joining the MBA course, each of you have decided that you need to learn something new and are committed an intelligent, really intelligent learning strategy. I hope this investment in your knowledge will improve your lives and those around you. Now, I started my full-time 2-year MBA program in Manchester, England over 40 years ago and graduated in 1981, as Iba has mentioned. Looking back and seeing how the world has changed, I believe that something is still missing from the current general education system, and that is teaching us the ability to learn from what does not work and rewarding us for learning something different. I understand that education by charter must have a benchmark based on historic knowledge, but I do believe that any education program should learn from the past and teach for the future. In the context of learning for the future, I want to talk a bit about scenarios and how they play a very important role in deciding your own strategy about anything and everything. Although it is surprisingly hard to create good ones, they help you ask the right questions and prepare you for the unexpected. That is hugely valuable. Scenarios are powerful tools. Scenarios enable you to steer a course between the false certainty of a single forecast and the confused paralysis that often strike in troubled times, like we're witnessing now. When constructing scenarios, it's easy to be trapped by the past. We are typically too optimistic going into a downturn and too pessimistic on the way out. No one is immune really to this trap, including professional builders of scenarios and the businesses that use them. When the economy is heading into a downturn, pessimistic scenarios should always be pushed beyond what feels comfortable. When the economy has entered the downturn, there is a need for scenarios that may seem unreasonably optimistic. The breadth of a scenario set can be tested by identifying extreme events, low probability, high impact outcomes from the past years, and seeing whether the scenario set contains anything comparable. Obviously, such an event would never be a core scenario, but businesses ought to know what they would do, say, if some, as we're facing now, deadly strain of flu were to emerge, or if it is, or unexpected geopolitical conflict exploded, as we're witnessing in certain regions. Scenarios ought to be treated and created dynamically. Depending on the level of detail they aspire to, some might have a shelf life numbered only in months, others may be kept and reused over a period of years, like handling a strain of virus. Do we learn next time how to handle people arriving at the airport? You know, there is a strategy of learning. This raises the question of how long companies should hold on to a scenario. The answer is, to retain some relevance, a scenario must be a living thing. Bear in mind, the one instance in which strategists will not want to use scenarios is when uncertainty is so great that they cannot be built reliably at any level of detail. Just as scenarios help to avoid group thinking, they can also generate a group think of their own. If everyone in an organization thinks the world can be categorized into 4 boxes on a quadrant, it may convince itself that only 4 outcomes or kinds of outcomes can happen. That is very dangerous. Strategists should not think that they have all the reasonable scenarios when there are quite different possibilities out there, for there are always elements strategists will miss, like all of us. They should therefore avoid scenarios that fall on a single spectrum. A scenario set should always contain at least 4 alternatives, in my view. Show 3 and people will always pick the middle one. 4 forces them to discover which way they truly lean. 2 is always too few unless there is only one big swing factor affecting the situation. I think developing scenarios is an art and a science and some philosophy thrown in. People learn by experience. It is useful for users and scenario developers to look back at old scenarios and ask themselves what, in retrospect, they missed. What could have been known at the time that would have made for better scenarios? Scenarios should be based on creative thinking, on intelligent learning, about how predicted changes in the business environment will alter the competitive landscape. If the environment changes in a scenario, but the competitors remain the same, that scenario might not be imaginative enough. Scenarios are in fact harder than they look, harder to conceptualize, harder to build, and uncomfortably rich in shortcomings. A good one takes time to build, and so a whole set takes a correspondingly large investment of time, energy, and knowledge. In my book, Intelligent Learning, Competing in Systemic Chaos, I offer my personal approach to learning based on experience in managing speedy changes in business, to be able to survive and succeed in the current continuously fast-changing business environment. Learning is not about a matter of any single problem met with a single solution. Obtaining results in learning is about incremental growth every day, just as with a marathon. The challenge of learning has nothing to do with taking big leaps forward in short bursts. Intelligent learning is about raising our game to the highest level and having the stamina to sustain that and never stop evolving. Central to the ideas in the book is the need for intelligent learning to be able to adapt to systemic chaos, the term I use to describe the new normal of modern business environment. It is the reality that we are where technological and political changes is on the verge of perpetually upending almost every sector that we know. In this setting, not responding quickly enough makes it inevitable that you perish and decay as faster and more nimble competition takes over. Competing in a business environment of systemic chaos means having faster access to correct information and the ability to interpret it better to make predictions. This is what will give you the edge you need to place bets on what will work and what will not. Despite the world now having better access to information and becoming more scientifically minded, collectively we are less able to question simple facts openly. We seem to unconsciously gravitate towards the prevailing vision of the group to which we belong and seal ourselves off collectively from observing any feedback that deviates from our consensual reality. In this bubble mentality, arguments are not based on the underlying facts. Instead, any conclusions drawn are frequently predetermined without any empirical evidence taken into consideration. Our primary assumptions about the situation and the initial decisions we base our plan on without any allowance for course correction along the way can turn out to be completely false and fundamentally unfounded. One can see this how many problems are approached almost religiously, and disagreeing on facts is done as a matter of proving your devotion to a faith or a belief. Under such circumstances, finding real answers to problems is almost impossible. We are all prone to defend our beliefs with cherry-picked facts. Breaking through this bubble is a must to move beyond thinking that it is motivated by self-interest for our reputation and our tribe. We are always concerned to help our team win and to make it clear that we are on our team's side as well as being against the other side. Even though we may believe otherwise, seeking the truth is not our aim when you observe and reason. Furthermore, the greater the complexity and the higher the IQ of the people involved, the stronger this willful blindness appears to be. Simply being more intelligent does not automatically make a person better at perceiving, interpreting, or learning. A higher IQ will make you better at reasoning, but also better at finding reasons to support your bias. It is easy to see how we are not programmed at finding arguments support the opposing side. Intelligent learning teaches an approach to counter being impeded from crucially testing opposing theory by seeking corroborating evidence and systematically challenging these. Without this approach, flawed thinking presents a fatal danger to any organization. Intelligent learning can be applied in every walk of life, whether it is business or learning to grow and expand your understanding of the world. To address weaknesses and blind spots, we first have to know what these are. Honestly, acknowledging our weaknesses is probably the most difficult lessons to learn. It is even more difficult than actually doing what is needed to take corrective action. Very rarely can success in business be explained as having been a matter of luck. No matter where you are from or what your circumstances are, how well you perform and the results you achieve will mostly be about preparations you have made and the work you put in to first learn and put into practice. The world economies are changing, and to survive, each of us should try to be a business owner in our own right, an entrepreneur without the label, providing the best quality services to others that want it. As a business owner, you work harder and more professionally and passionately when you own what you work for. The business becomes your family, your friend, your escape, and your addiction, which can be destructive if one loses focus of what is really important in life. I would like to stress the importance of mentoring and coaching. Business leaders must act with conviction, even in an era of growing complexity, uncertainty, and disruption. These business leaders need clear, concise, well-informed perspectives on the important dynamics that are currently reshaping their business environments. Starting a business is easy. It's exciting, like any game you learn to play, with its own rules, managers, and referees. But the difference is that failure might have financial severe implications on you. And like any game, if you do not understand the rules that are written or implied, you will lose the game or at best not be a good player. To succeed, any business has basic components and processes that must be available. And if you understand them or have someone teach them to you, like in a business school, accelerated learning environment, and mentor you and coach you like in any sports game, then you are bound to excel and definitely not fail. To succeed, you must provide something that the market wants and is ready to pay for. And provided you give quality service, you will succeed. I study businesses and take from each experience a learning that I can use in new areas of business. And to me, this is real innovation. I believe innovation is doing something differently, but not necessarily doing something not done before, but done maybe in a different sector or in parts. And since the world now is virtual and connected, you can take what works in one place and use it somewhere else. Now, going back to business, starting a business is easy. Being successful needs planning and being introduced to opportunities that you can create if you search intelligently. I know successful business people who invested in sectors they did not necessarily understand. They approached the investment as a business model that had the right components and processes needed to make it work. Going back to basics, to start a business is easy, but to make it succeed, you need more than just a good idea. If you want to grow your business and are looking for some hard and fast rules for success, the truth is that there aren't any, except if you win the lottery, which is unlikely. The discipline, the thinking, the network of knowledge, and the learning approach that the MBA program offers at good business schools ensures that your real life business learning will be more right than wrong. Intelligent learners need to understand their own passions and their own goals in order to find success that is theirs alone. This is not a recipe you can follow to the letter, expecting a guaranteed result, but with a little experimentation and the right ingredients, the right strategy, and the right focus, you can find what success means to you, regardless of your definition of success. There are, oddly enough, a great number of common characteristics that are shared by successful business people, by intelligent learners. If I were to ask to define a successful entrepreneur or a businessman, my definition would be, it is an individual who understands the risk associated with creating, organizing, and owning a business. He or she has to have the following attributes, in my view: creative, goal-oriented, independent, inquisitive, persistent, responsible, risk-taker, self-confident. The learned skills that they can learn in a business school or equivalent from a mentor or a coach are business processes, communication skills, decision-making skills, human relations, which are very important because we're humans and we deal with people, analytical skills, problem-solving skills, and definitely technical skills if you're engineering or in technology. All the above can be learned in this business school environment. But most important, he or she must have an attitude with what I call with a very big A. When you talk to entrepreneurs, they never talk about their failures. And if they do, it is more to understand what went wrong. They dwell on their successes and think about ways of recreating those successes. Even if you do not have all of these characteristics and not attending a business school program, most can be learned with practice and by developing a winning attitude, especially if you set goals and apply yourself through strategic planning to reach those goals in incremental and measurable stages. Like any activity you pursue, there are certain musts that are required to be successful in a chosen activity. If your goal is success in business, the formula is no different. You must have a goal. And the most important goal is never, never, ever stop learning. Learning is the most important thing you can invest in yourself. You read a lot, you listen to people, you question. It doesn't matter if you're becoming a pain in the neck, just you need to find out what works for you. And you have to take what you do very seriously. You have to plan meticulously. You have to follow up diligently. You have to definitely manage your money wisely and build a great business team that give you the advice and the knowledge that is lacking in you. You need to know your customers and you need to be accessible. You need to be really a shameless self-promoter. And now with the digital media, that's very easy. You need to grab attention properly whenever you can. You need to become known as an expert and create a competitive advantage. And you need to build a rock-solid reputation and a brand that people recognize. and definitely need to be a master negotiator, and all the time have fun, because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, in all likelihood, it is safe to assume that it will be reflected in the success of your business or lack of success. If you do not enjoy what you're doing, chances is that you will not succeed. Now, I will stop here and take some of your questions. I just want to get you thinking, because of my involvement in at some stages in Adaptec and in Fakir's sale to NMC and what the hell is happening in NMC, some involvement in Abraj at some stage, and definitely Drake and Skull. These are three to me major failures that have happened because either the management didn't learn properly or they were influencing factors that they were not followed, or the strategy was wrong. So I'll leave you to ask me any questions that you want, provided I'm allowed to answer them.
So you can type in your questions in the question area. What do you think happened at Adaptec?
Can you be more specific? Because lots of things happened. They built the tallest building on earth, for example.
So Marco, can you be specific with your question? Do you accept interns in your company to learn?
No. If you're doing the MBA, it's more than enough, I guess. They already abuse you enough, so.
Ziad has graciously offered to coach some of you who have read the book. So if you want to receive a copy of the book, you can stop by our office and I'll give you a copy, and then we will hold a session where he can answer all your questions. And if you want to take it to the next level, make use of his coaching sessions, then please email me and I can connect you.
Yeah, we were hoping to do some workshops on coaching in small groups. It's just that with this coronavirus that is stopping us from socializing in groups, we had to delay that.
Unfortunately, but we can do this later when everything has settled down. So let me see if there is any question. So maybe we can just, is there anything that you would like to, what do you think happened at Adaptec after you left?
Well, I can address some of these points without being personal against some of the useless management, basically. I mean, Adaptec, what happened is when I took over, the whole market was going through a tailspin. The financial market was suffering. The whole region was suffering. Adaptec is a contractor, therefore it depends on the developers that were not selling enough or not collecting enough. The banks were not providing facilities because it was something new. So the most important thing in Adaptec in those days was to get the balance sheet sorted out and not the P&L. Profits and margins were not important. What's important is to verify the value of the assets that are there. You know, what we have partly is staff, partly is equipment, and partly the most important thing is basically receivables. And this is the issue of receivables. There seems to be a recurring theme in the public companies here. If it's Abraj, Capital, or Drake and Skull, or Adaptec, or even NMC at the moment. So I had a very specific strategy to rebalance the balance sheet, really get it balanced, clean it up, live within the restrictions that we had because of the whole world market collapsing in 2008, the big banks going under, the mortgage rates really ripping people off. And that was very important for us. And I had to reposition the company in a sense. We're not dependent on the Dubai market, and we were in different sectors. So we're not only in constructing tall towers, we're also in constructing villas, we were also in constructing infrastructure, power stations, gas stations, oil and gas, and in different regions. At that time, Saudi Arabia was opening up. So it was logical that we move some of the assets over there and get the work done. So the strategy was concentrate on the balance sheet, use your asset, maximize the value, reschedule the loans, and keep everybody happy. And I believe I succeeded in that. The team that came over had a different view. Their view was to manipulate the share price and maximize the short-term value individually, which I think is immoral. They brought in a new management a few years ago. Again, we're more interested in being on the cover of magazines than doing proper business. They raised 1.5 billion dirhams that, in my view, disappeared the first year, but they lied about their accounts and they had no clue but to show it this year. So end of year, they had about 800 million of losses. Part of the hidden losses were the sale of assets. So that is Adaptec. Drake and Skull was a different story altogether because they were buying fictitious assets that were overvalued, that were owned by the previous CEO, and he was taking the cash, hiding the losses to maximize the value, and all of a sudden they couldn't hide it anymore. The same with Abraj. Abraj were inflating the value of their assets, and all of a sudden Arif is sitting in London and Mustafa in Washington. Funnily enough, 2 days ago, it was Mustafa Abdul Wadoud's birthday. It showed up on my connections, so I didn't send him a happy birthday. I don't think he's enjoying his happy birthday under home arrest custody in the US. Which brings us back to NMC. I mean, NMC is a very good operator, very good company, very good assets. It's just that the management openly and blatantly lied about their personal interest ahead of the company and lied about accounts to manipulate the price. Again, typical. And again, this is affecting our reputation as financial markets, specifically in the UAE and the region as a whole. If you look at even Aramco IPO, it was listed locally to ensure that the price is more or less contained. Still a great achievement that we have the biggest oil company in the world listed, and it's owned by an Arab country in the GCC. So that is what we're talking about. I mean, they had a short-term view. Their goals were not the same as those of the shareholders. And again, we can talk about governance and compliance in a different session. But that's what's happening in most of these companies. The problem with construction companies is very cyclical. So now we have Expo 2020, we built extensively. We're hoping lots of people to visit, a big chunk of those coming from China, and all of a sudden we have the coronavirus. Airlines have stopped the travel, schools are stopped. So as we were saying, I mean, when I talked about the strain, the flu mutation strain, I mean, this speech was written even before we knew about corona, basically. But it's a fact that something can happen that is not under your control, and it can affect and influence everything. Like if you follow the American elections, all of a sudden Biden is in the picture again because people are becoming more reasonable and more logical and less emotional. You know, you can see the swing again. Look at the numbers and so on. I hope that addresses that point that was raised.
We have another question.
I'm working for one.
What do you think about the situation? Which situation? Sarah, if you can specify which situation you mean. We're back. If you were to be back to when you graduated, who would you have chosen? Would you have chosen a different pathway, and any regrets?
Well, I mean, I always wonder about that now that I've reached my age of retirement and I can get my free pass on the bus in London, which I applied for. But they said, we need to see a proof that you're that old. They didn't believe that I reached that age where I can actually went to the post office and did that. I don't think I regret anything, except there are certain situations that could have probably reduced my anguish or my sorrow or my unhappiness when I knew they were not working, if it is personal or business or partnerships. I should have bought Google shares a long time ago, basically. Definitely not invest in Tesla. And if you have Tesla shares, I think you should sell them because at some stage they're going to go down the tube one way or another. No, I don't regret anything. And I think I believe, because I'm a believer, I think everything was written for me and it's destiny, as we say. You can influence it, but at the end of the day, it's a journey you have to go through. So no, I don't regret anything whatsoever.
I'm working for NMC Healthcare.
Well, you got paid at least, yeah, probably.
What do you think about the situation?
Well, as we said, I mean, I've worked closely with the management. I've advised on certain acquisitions that were not overvalued. I think the concept was right, but I don't know what went wrong because they started on the right track, and then all of a sudden they panicked, started buying assets that are overvalued for whatever reason, There could be that there are personal interests in it and unfair treatment. And I was surprised, as you know, NMC is a public company and they have a committee specifically for related party transactions. I want to know where the hell they have been when all the transactions were done internally. The problem is they borrowed heavily, and to hide their borrowings, they borrowed heavily without declaring it. And you cannot do that in a public company because it's not your company. I think it has good assets, has good cash flow. The issue is, again, a balance sheet issue. They overborrowed for acquiring assets that are overvalued for whatever reason. Could be malicious, could be criminal, could be fraudulent, but what is done is done. And the company still has, is still the biggest private sector healthcare provider in the region. And the deals that they've done in Saudi Arabia will double and triple their value. But at the moment, unless they bring in a good transition team who are competent and capable, and I personally have question mark about the capabilities of the existing team or the board, because none of them has faced such issues before, that it'll go through. We know on Monday, all the potential bidders, or supposedly potential bidders, they just vanished. The Italians supposedly were doing a deal with some of the Abu Dhabi entities. That disappeared because we all knew that there would be bad news on Tuesday coming out, which came out on Monday, talking about the further 2.7 billion of debt. And I guarantee you probably there's still another billion or half a billion somewhere. So no bidder will buy it at a liability that exceeds the market cap. When it was 9 billion, 4 billion liability probably is acceptable. But when the market cap is 2 billion, a liability of 5, possibly 6 is not acceptable. I think something will happen. And unless they go in quickly and appoint the right people, when I mean the right people, not the right advisors, we need the right people who go in and, as we did in Adaptec, say, I'll pay this, don't pay that, show me this, show me that. Because if you don't have doctors that are attending surgeries and you have receptionists that are meeting clients and clients who believe that the insurance will cover them because the insurance have just kicked NMC out of the system because they're not providing the service, then there is no company. I hope it doesn't get to that point.
So I have a question. How to do the customer relationship management in construction industry? In situations like today, I think that's a different question. So in situations like today that we are facing due to multiple factors, including COVID-19 and slowing down caused by trade wars and geopolitics, if we face an economic recession, what should be the appropriate strategy?
Well, I mean, there are different issues. There is the personal strategy, and there is the community strategy, and there is the country strategy. I cannot comment on the last two because I'm not a politician, as I keep on telling people. But on a personal strategy, you have to do and live with whatever is available. Again, you need to see what your priorities are and see if your resources can meet them. Otherwise, you have to change those priorities or delay them. I'll give you an example. I mean, when you look at the construction industry or the real estate development in Dubai, there are lots of statistics I personally question. When they say we've delivered, let's say last year we were supposed to deliver 58 or 60 odd thousand residential units. They said we delivered 42,000 or 38,000. I don't know if it is true, and I don't know if they are forcing people to just take possession, otherwise they lose their deposit or their money because they just want to get to numbers. So how you deal with that, you have to decide. I mean, I'll give you an example. My best friend has a property that he's borrowed against, he's renting, and he has a big villa that he is supposed to receive now. But then he doesn't have the full amount to pay the 30 or 40% balance. So the choices are, does he go and borrow and commit himself for another 5 years of borrowing from a bank that might, because they're not doing well, increase the interest rate at their whim? Or should he get out of that investment and keep only one property and take the loss that might incur, which of 100 or 200 or 300,000? My advice was, take the loss and don't take the liability of another 3 million, because over 3 years, that 3 million might become 3.5 or 4 million, whereas your loss now is specific, and you already have one property that you are renting. As a matter of fact, you sell it, get the deposit on the second property, clear all the loan, get another 200,000 in your bank, and buy a brand new sports car, basically, so you can drive to your clinic in a happy way with no liability. So this is what I would suggest you do. We didn't expect to have the coronavirus. I don't know how that will affect the Expo 2020. Hopefully it will not, because we're putting great hopes on that investment, all of us, that we have put together. But at the end of the day, I mean, when I was a student, I didn't have money, so I had to walk to save, in those days, 10 pence for the bus. Did it make any difference? No, it didn't. I had to do it. You just have to get on with it. But again, your personal situation is your personal situation, and I don't think anybody can give you advice on everything.
So during this economic session, what should be the appropriate strategy during this time? Either to invest and take advantage of low prices, or to reduce spending to keep the risk low?
Well, I mean, if you have guaranteed income of $1 million a year, it's different than not having an income of, you might be fired tomorrow on a 20,000 dirham salary. So it's difficult to decide. But if you can afford to buy highly stressed assets that have either a short-term view or a long-term view, provided your strategy is right. So you might go and buy a property tomorrow because you think its peak was X and now you're buying it at 60%. But if you look at how many of those properties are available, you might not even realize the 60% if you're desperate to sell it within 6 months because you borrowed against it. So the question is, what is your disposable income and what's your appetite for risk? And how will it affect your lifestyle or your standard of living if you make that decision? In my case, I mean, in the UK, I was buying properties right, left, and center last 2 years because everybody was panicking and the pound was down. And I was right in my assessment. It was a matter of time because things settled. And now the pound is getting strong again, and there's a demand for buying and selling properties, basically, as compared to rental. So I got a low asset, higher yield, and now I can sell it and compensate myself on the low yield that I had. But then again, the value of the asset has gone up. So it depends on your personal situation. If you believe that your investment will add value to your business and your life and your family and so on, then you should consider it. For example, if you're going to stay in Dubai for another 5 years and you're paying relatively high rent, probably you should consider buying a discounted property, because over 5 years, I guarantee you, you will not lose whatever you've invested. So unless we know your personal situation, it's difficult really to give you more specific advice.
IVF was one of them. She's asking about I think she's referring to Faqih.
Well, I mean, if the question is, was the acquisition of Faqih IVF an overvalued asset? The answer is no, because it's probably one of the better producing margins to the business. I know that because I follow up on that. I mean, in my days, it's doing better margins, but then again, I can always be arrogant and say I run businesses better than most people. But they're still doing a very high margin, and I think it is one of the most successful businesses that they bought. What I'm referring to is some of the big hospitals that the price was paid very highly, and it was never integrated as a strategy, or the small clinics with 2 doctors that walk away the moment they get the check. That, to me, even if you buy a dirham, if you buy it for a dirham, it's a waste of money and overvalue. So that's on the acquisition side. They acquired too many too quickly without a strategy for integration and generating revenue. For example, I mean, we're doing about 4,500 procedures a year at the IVF business. NMC was seeing about 5 million patients, and the IVF business never grew at all in 2 years. That tells me there is something wrong in the integration that we're talking about, because out of the 5 million people or 5 million patients they see, there must be at least 5,000 who might seek advice on IVF. Yeah, it's 1 in 1,000. We know that the population is in the UAE population is between expats and is substantially higher than that, the people that need treatment. Because if you look at the statistics in the UAE, we have a declining population. The growth rate is less than 2%. Therefore, we need more children, and they support it in that sense. So no, I don't believe the Faqih IVF was an overpriced acquisition. and is still contributing very well to the bottom line. I'm talking about other acquisitions that to me were, if you didn't have a proper strategy, were overvalued, like some of the hospital acquisitions that they did last 2 years and so on.
So what are your thoughts on Saudi OJ collapse?
Well, it collapsed. That's the end of the story. It's not going to be resurrected for different political reasons. There were certain, in my view, entities of the past that the new leadership decided they need to clear it. So it's sad. It was a big company, but the same with Sojex, as a Lebanese Saudi company, the same with other entities. Janus, Parascalfaidis, JNP doesn't exist anymore. From the days of Onassis and the old days when he came Saudi and moved the oil in '73 with King Faisal. This is life. I mean, Wang Computer doesn't exist, Kodak doesn't exist, so we just have to move on. I mean, some of the big construction companies in the UK collapsed too. Again, it so happened it's the same auditors, but I'm not attacking Pricewaterhouse at all.
Not today, at least. Okay, so let's see if we have more questions. So it wasn't down to bad management.
What?
Saudi OJ, I think, is referring to.
No, I think Saudi Arabia was more that they were not paid on time. They had receivables that were piling up. And in construction, as you know, you borrow against the projects. If you can't pay, the banks will not support you anymore, and there's no business. It's exactly what happened, for example, up to a point with Drake and Skull, but Drake and Skull, the management was stealing in a different way. Auger, it was a private company, so there was no need to steal in that sense. It's just that they were not paid, and Auger went through this cycle over the last 40 years, more than once. 20 years ago, they were owed about 11 billion that was paid, and that helped them. But I think now it's a different reason why they're not being paid, because there is work in Saudi Arabia. It's a big market, and there is funding. But certain businesses, for some reason or another, they don't survive, and this one didn't. After the founder passed away and his sons ran it.
So if you have any questions, just type them in. If you want to get in touch with Ziad, you can email me and I can connect you if you would like to have a coaching session, or if you would like to have a copy of his book on intelligent learning, competing in systemic chaos. You can also email me or just stop by the office to collect your copy. Thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, I think we'll be staying for 2 more minutes or 5 more minutes, so we can take a few more questions. There was a question about coaching.
I think it's right to you, and then see, because we can't.
Yeah. So there's no. There is this question.
What is your?
What are your retirement goals? Are you open to mentor or coach emerging entrepreneurs?
I mean, sometimes I do, but it depends on the person. What I don't like is a young entrepreneur who tells me what to do. And provided we have an agreement that we respect our views and our ideas, then we do. I work with lots of businesses that they start a meeting by giving me a lecture what I should tell them to do. And I usually say, good for you, because you already know. Usually I do, but I don't do as much now. One of the things that we're proposing with the business school is that we were proposing to have a series of workshops, coaching, up between 5 and 10 people at a time, maybe a 4-hour session of the weekend over like 2 or 3 months. That will help you, which is probably, as a learning process, it's faster because everybody else can learn from everybody else at the same time from the same questions and so on. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen now because of the coronavirus, our latest import from China, I guess. So we'll be working on that. I mean, I do coach, but selectively, because I mean, I'm working with lots of boards and companies at the moment. I might not be available all the time.
Okay, So any final words, any final advice that you would like to give?
No, I mean, one of the things that I mentioned probably people didn't pay attention to. You have an incredible opportunity of this network in the business school of knowledge. This is accelerated, heated knowledge that you should make the most out of it. If it's your friends, if it is people in the school, if it's the team members, if it is the professors, if it is the speakers, and it's the network, you should make the most out of it. What used to annoy me when I was doing my MBA is the complaints that all the other members were complaining. Oh, that person do the work instead of learning and trying to get the most out of it. You have an opportunity. I know the executive MBA is different than the full-time MBA because you spend more time together. But I think you should hang out more together and kick ideas and discuss things. This is my advice to you, because this environment, you've invested a lot of time and money in being in it. If you don't use it, it's a waste of money as far as I'm concerned. I mean, money as in time and effort and everything else. So thank you.
So thank you all. If you have any questions, as I said before, you can email them to me. If you want a copy of the book, just email me, and we will be sharing a recording of this session perhaps tomorrow. So thank you all, and I wish you all a very good evening. Thanks for joining us, and let's stay connected with one another. Thank you. Goodbye.